Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show.
Cup of Joe Wrestling Show
with Joey Harris. A podcast for the wrestling fan on the go. So take your favorite beverage of choice and join Joey as he takes a look at some of the biggest shows on the WWE Network.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show. I am your host, Joey Harris. And folks, have you ever had the feeling that you have a full tank of gas, yet nowhere to go? That sounds like a great tagline to a 80s buddy cop movie, but that is my life right now. I had to go out and get some groceries on a mobile pickup order, and then when I came back, I saw that gas was $1.50. Gas was $1.50, and it took just under 7 gallons to fill me up because I really haven't been anywhere for the past month. So I filled it up, and now I have a full tank of gas and nowhere to go. That is life in today's quarantine society, a social distancing society for you. Regardless of that, how are you doing on your social distancing sojourn? Staying inside, staying quarantined. Hoping I'm giving you a little bit of entertainment today. Let's roll right into it. Today we're going to be looking at WrestleRock 86 from the AWA. WrestleRock 86 took place on Sunday, April the 20th, 1986, my mother-in-law's 24th birthday. She was 6 days away from getting married to my father-in-law. Took place from the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 23,000 people were in attendance, but this card was not available via closed circuit or on pay-per-view, nor was an official videotape ever released, although several matches were later shown on the AWA on ESPN show. The most famous thing about this event was the WrestleRock Rumble song that the wrestlers did to promote the event in the style of the Super Bowl Shuffle. It was 1986 after all. Sadly, it is not on the event, but can be found easily online, and it has to be seen to be believed. We start off with the national anthem playing, but we never get by whom. This is common with this show, and I would really like to thank WrestlingDVDNetwork.com for providing some information that I could not get on my own. After the national anthem, we get Ken Resnick interviewing Brad Rheingans. He has Boris Zukov first. Gary Michael Capetta does the ring introduction. Boris has Sheik Adnan Al-KC with him. Rod Trongard is on the call. Back and forth to start out. Rheingans gets the win with a power slam. Gary Lumpkin, a local celebrity, refs the midget match. And yes, folks, this is what it was called in 1986. I'm not saying it was right. I'm saying that that's what it was called. A few years ago, when they would show the AWA on ESPN show on ESPN Classics, I was in my apartment at the time washing dishes, and I'm listening with one ear on, and Larry Nelson says, folks, get your kids around, gather around the TV sets because will be wrestling today. And we know how kids love and they would bleep it out. They would silence it. He was saying the word midgets. So again, not saying it's right, saying what it was called. It's a tag team match. Lord Littlebrook and Little Tokyo versus Little Mr. T, who's the Haiti kid and who was in Mr. T's corner at WrestleMania 2 that had taken place just a few weeks prior to this. He's tagging with Cowboy Lang. The heels dominate early. Little Mr. T comes in, then they go back and forth. The heels regain control. Little Tokyo hits Lord Littlebrook accidentally 2 times. Cowboy Lang gets the pin on Lord Littlebrook after a scissor roll. Wahoo McDaniel versus Colonel De Beers is next. Farm Service Director of a local station, Chuck Lilligren, is the guest ring announcer. Wahoo starts out by hitting Colonel De Beers with hard right hands, back and forth. De Beers is slammed out of the ring. Later, Wahoo is also thrown out. Wahoo then comes back with a fury, throws Colonel De Beers over the top rope for the DQ. They then start to chop each other on the outside for a while. The Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty versus Buddy Rose and Doug Summers with Sherry Martel is next, but it is edited out of the network version. Rose and Summers win. University of Minnesota Athletic Director Paul Giel is introduced. Piece of human slime that we talked about last week, Rock and Roll Buck Zumhoff, is interviewed by Ken Resnick, but again, the idiot has his boombox on and you can't hear him. Common theme with this slime. Tiger Mask meets Hikaru Misawa versus Rock and Roll Buck Zumhoff. Back and forth to start with some solid mat wrestling. Buck Zumhoff starts doing the taking the mask off gimmick, which I hate. It's not the point of the match. Tiger Mask hits a top rope somersault for the pin. Minnesota Governor Rudy Perpich announces Vern Gagne Day, but it is also edited out of the network version. Ken Resnick interviews Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham. Ken mentions that they are former WWF Tag Team Champions. They want the AWA tag belts, and they take on the Fabulous Ones here. Windham and Rotunda versus the Fabulous Ones, Stan Lane and Steve Kern. Note, the Fabulous Ones had competed in a losing effort in the first round of the Jim Crockett Sr. Memorial Tag Team Tournament just the night before in New Orleans. There's too much talk between the referee and the Fabs to start. Back and forth. Good chain wrestling. Both teams doing some solid mat wrestling here. Windham and Rotunda have a slight edge as it goes along. The Fabs come back. Several close pins by both teams. Windham gets the pin after coming off the top rope after an elbow smash. Bulldog Bob Brown versus Giant Baba. For some reason, for the longest time, Wikipedia says this match didn't happen, to the displeasure of anyone viewing it, I'm sure. I didn't expect much, and it does not live up to my expectations. Baba wins after a big boot and a pin. Harley Race is interviewed by Ken Resnick about Rick Martel. Harley Race also issues a challenge to current AWA champion Stan Hansen. As he finishes up, Rick Martel heads to the ring. Battle of the Ex-Champions, Harley Race versus Rick Martel. Wrestling holds to start, back and forth. Test of strength at one point. Rest holds. Race does a great over-the-top bump. Both men eventually go up and over and get counted out. They then continue to brawl outside. Then it is time for the $50,000 10-woman Battle Royal. Your participants are Sherry Martel, Luna Vachon, being called Leona Vachon here, Joyce Grable, Kat LaRue, Rose Devine, Taylor Thomas, Despina Montegas, Misty Blue Sims, Debbie Combs, and Candy Devine, who's the AWA Women's Champion. It's a typical battle royal with lots of hair pulling. Sherry at one point rolls to the floor. Joyce Grable is last eliminated by Candy Devine, who thinks she has won, but Sherry sneaks back in to eliminate her and wins the battle royal. Sherry Martel, Doug Summers, and Buddy Rose celebrate in the ring as she is given the check. They all want shots at the champions. Kamala with Skandor Akbar versus Sergeant Slaughter is next. Slaughter is AWA Americans Champion here. Larry Nelson joins commentary. Sarge has G.I. Joe on his tights. Back and forth. At one point, Sarge launches himself towards the turnbuckle in a classic Sarge style on an Irish whip. Akbar gives Kamala an object that he hits Slaughter with, and they do the spot a couple of times. Sarge then hits a drop kick and slams Kamala. Slaughter gets the Cobra Clutch on Kamala. Akbar comes up and grabs Slaughter. Kamala goes to hit Slaughter, and he moves and Akbar gets hit. Akbar loses his whip, and Slaughter whips both men with it. Sergeant Slaughter wins by DQ to retain. Larry Nelson then interviews Sergeant Slaughter, and he brings some kids on to do the Pledge of Allegiance. AWA Tag Team Champions Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig versus the Long Riders, Bill and Scott Irwin. Scott Hall is presented the Most Popular Wrestler trophy by Pro Wrestling Report before the match. Kurt Hennig is good here, but is going to get so much better. Back and forth to start. Pretty even match. Kurt Hennig gets the pin after a flying drop kick on Bill Irwin. Scott Irwin comes in and hits the champs with a loaded boot after the bell. Larry Nelson interviews the champs after the match about the loaded boot. Ken Resnick then interviews Scott Ledoux about Larry Zbyszko. Scott Ledoux with benchwarmer Bob Lertzema versus Larry Zbyszko with Go the Ninja in a 10-round European rules match. Larry the Axe Hennig is a special guest referee. The rounds are 2 minutes and each participant is wearing 4-ounce karate gloves. In round 1, Ledoux dominates early, classic Zbyszko stalling tactics, Larry striking late. Round 2, Larry striking early, Scott fights back, they go back and forth. In round 3, Ledoux starts out with a swollen eye. Zbyszko comes out fiercely attacking Ledoux, who gets defensive quick. Round 4, Ledoux comes out fighting. He's the proverbial house of fire. Zbyszko is out on his feet. Larry gets knocked out but is saved by the bell. Round 5, it quickly goes outside. Zbyszko puts Ledoux in the ring post for the DQ. Go hits Ledoux from behind and Larry uses the nunchucks on him and gets hit by the axe. Nick Bockwinkel versus AWA heavyweight champion Stan Hansen. Hansen beats up Larry Nelson before the match. Bockwinkel brings a whip to the ring. They brawl on the outside to start. In the ring, they go back and forth. This, to me, is the match of the night. You've heard of the Lion in winter? Nick Bockwinkel is the Lion in late April. They spill back outside the ring. They start to brawl. Back in the ring, Bockwinkel gets dropped throat first on the ropes, but Hansen only gets a 2 count. Then they trade near falls. The ref gets hit accidentally. He gets back up just as Stan Hansen throws Bockwinkel over the top rope for a DQ. They brawl briefly after. Larry Nelson then interviews Nick Bockwinkel. Nick is just tremendous here in this interview. He's sweaty. He's tired. There's sweat just rolling off of his face. But he also cuts a tremendous promo here. We fade out, and when it comes back, the cage is up. Nor the Barbarian, who's just called the Barbarian here, and King Kong Brody, who is Bruiser Brody, but can't be called Bruiser Brody, because Dick the Bruiser used to wrestle here, so he has to be called King Kong Brody, which when King Kong Bundy wrestled here had to be called Boom Boom Bundy. Are you confused? Welcome to the AWA. With Sheik Adnan Al-KC versus Jimmy Snuka, subbing for Crusher Blackwell, and Greg Gagne with Vern Gagne. If Gagne and Snuka win, Vern Gagne gets Sheik Adnan in the cage for 10 minutes, back and forth to start, and Brody is stiff. It breaks down and they all brawl. Jimmy Snuka hits the splash on Brody. Gagne and Brody are both bleeding. Double drop kick on Barbarian. Double suplex on Brody. Snuka hits Gagne accidentally from the top rope after Barbarian moves. Then Brody drop kicks Barbarian accidentally and Snuka gets the pin. All 4 men brawl outside the ring. Vern gets Sheik inside the ring and the cage. Vern is 60 here. Sheik is bleeding almost immediately. Vern whips Sheik with his own gun belt. They go back and forth. Vern then gets the pin with the cradle. Rod Trongard recaps the end of the match. Larry Nelson interviews Vern Gagne, who said that this is absolutely his last match. Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin versus the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering. Hayes puts a pile driver on Hawk, who no-sells it. Hayes then bleeds. Garvin refuses to tag. Hayes tags Garvin when he isn't looking. Garvin doesn't want to go in. Animal gets a 2 count. Hayes then doesn't want to tag. Back and forth they go. Hayes puts the figure 4 on Hawk. Hawk reverses it. An inadvertent hit gets the win for the Road Warriors. Hayes went to hit Animal, but he moved and Garvin gets hit. The Metrodome then empties out in record time, despite the fact that Waylon Jennings plays the concert afterwards. There are a number of ways that you can contact me. First of all, please leave a review if you like this show on your favorite podcast platform. It helps people to find the show. You can follow the show's Twitter at Cup of Joe Pod. You can email the show at cupofjoewrestlingshow@gmail.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I am at the Joey Harris. Thank you for joining me this week. This is Joey Harris saying so long from stately Maine Manor.
The Cup of Joe Wrestling Show is a production of Baby Kangaroo Media.